Hi everybody, welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. In this video, let's talk about Elder Uchtdorf, or at least at the time that I'm recording this, he's Elder Uchtdorf, but pretty soon he's going to become the acting president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. And I want to talk about him because from time to time, I'll hear things, whether it's in the comments or just people in my life, about politics and apostles and how we have apostles that may have supported other political parties than our own. And so we find this to be a problem. And I want to do this in the spirit of love, not contention. I want to say this and deliver this message before he is set apart as acting president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. And it doesn't just apply to him. It applies to any apostle that you feel may be of some different political persuasion or someone that you don't agree with. So we're going to talk about a few different things. We're going to talk about politics and what the church has said about politics. We're going to talk about the church and can the church be led astray? Do we need to worry about people that have a political philosophy that could, lead the church into forbidden paths and lead us astray? What about past apostles who left the church that were excommunicated, and can this happen again in the future? So we're going to talk about just a bunch of different things. And I think a lot of times when we have these kind of concerns, it comes from a place of fear. Sometimes it comes from just having too many other influences in your life. You're listening to podcasts or news radio or cable news, and you get radicalized because you consume more of that kind of content than church content. You basically, maybe unknowingly, make politics your primary religion and then your actual religion just a secondary religion. I feel like that happens to some people, and I don't think it's intentional. I think sometimes you can slip into that mode and be driven by fear and mistrust, and also be misled by the philosophies of men when they come in conflict with the doctrines of the church. So Elder Uchtdorf, unless something happens, I guess, he's definitely going to become the acting president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, and he may even become president of the church. Let's look at my spreadsheet for apostles. You can access my spreadsheets anytime. The link is in the description box of each video. So Elder Uchtdorf on this spreadsheet, he is the 101st apostle. We just witnessed the passing of President Holland. And the way it works out is you have President Oakes as the senior apostle. And then the next most senior is President Eyring, but he's in the first presidency. So if it wasn't for that, he would be president of the Quorum of the 12. Well, he is president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, and that's what makes the next most senior apostle after him the acting president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. So next in line after President Eyring is Elder Uchtdorf. And then after him, Elder Bednar, Elder Cook, and then it's President Christofferson, who's currently serving in the first presidency. So, and Elder Uchtdorf, he's only 85. Now, I mean, who knows? That is old. People pass away all the time in their 80s, 70s, 80s. But I just feel like, relatively speaking, relative to the first presidency, both this first presidency and President Nelson's first presidency, I feel like that's relatively young. And so it could be, we may be looking at a future president of the church. And it would be a first to have one that's a German. So that's really interesting. Okay, before we continue, just really quick, I'm still on my second update on this spreadsheet, but just remember we're doing the Book of Mormon challenge. We're trying to share as many copies of the Book of Mormon as we can. The goal is to try and share at least 10. And then to participate in the challenge, just let me know in the comments that you shared a copy of the Book of Mormon, but you have to include these hashtags. So hashtag BOM for Book of Mormon, hashtag missionaries if they ended up meeting with the missionaries, and so forth for baptism, endowment, and sealing. We did see success last time when we were doing the Flood the Earth challenge. We got to the ultimate goal of 10,000 copies of the Book of Mormon, and there were people that got baptized. So we want to do this again. So please only put it in the comments of my YouTube videos. Don't send me an email about it. Don't direct message me on Facebook or Instagram. That's one thing that made me burn out last time. I was looking all over the place. So we're just going to keep it in the comments on YouTube, and that way I can easily search them and then update this. And I'll keep track of it for you over here to the left. So I'll remind you every time that you leave a comment. I'll give you how many you've shared so far, so you don't need to keep track. But if you want, you can access this spreadsheet. It's the very first spreadsheet that pulls up. It's the first tab. All right, so let's make a difference and let's share the gospel and help prepare the church and the world for the second coming of Jesus Christ. So, yeah, politics and church, and it can be a really ugly thing. It doesn't help when you have entities out there like the Salt Lake Tribune. This is an article from July 1st of 2025. Gordon Monson, what other LDS leaders can learn, ... And it goes on to say from these three apostles. In the description here, it says, Tribune columnist Gordon Monson explains why three LDS apostles stand out with their messages of hope, grace, inclusion, which is one of those buzzwords nowadays, and above all, love. And unfortunately, love has even become a buzzword in the political arena. And, I'm not a big fan. The Salt Lake Tribune has historically been antagonistic toward the church, passive aggressive. They try and sow seeds of doubt and discord and discontent, and it can trigger people that are on the other side of the political spectrum. And that's why I just prefer to ignore articles like this, because I feel like the spirit in which they're being written is not helpful. But we need to keep ourselves in check, right? Now, there are instances in the early church where you had apostles that were excommunicated, and some of them returned and some of them didn't. So at the top of my spreadsheet, in column M, this indicates the apostles that were excommunicated. And in column N, the ones that returned after being excommunicated. Interestingly, we have Orson Hyde. He's the one that dedicated the Holy Land for the return of the Jews. He was excommunicated, but he came back. But you have other ones that didn't. Lyman E. Johnson, and here's William E. McLellin. He's buried here in Independence, Missouri. I made a video visiting his gravesite in the Woodlawn Cemetery over here off of Nolan Road. I later found out this is just like as you can see, it's a newer headstone, but I guess the original one is over here, like nearby. So I need to go back there and make a video again. So it happened, and it makes sense, especially with the early church. Those are really hard times. They went through a lot. I'm not going to judge him. I wouldn't be surprised if he sealed his fate and if other ones did too, but I'm not going to judge because it's not my job. And I hope the best for them. I hope that they can be given as much a benefit of a doubt as possible, given the circumstances in which they were placed. I would love nothing more than to find out that William E. McLellin somehow found grace or repented, if he was capable of doing that in the spirit world. I don't know, but I hope the best for everybody. This does not bother me that you have members of the church, apostles or not, that were excommunicated. Ultimately, the church survived, as you can see, and it's thriving. Oh, here he is, by the way. Here's a picture of him, William E. McLellin. So what do we do? What do we do if we suspect that there's someone in church leadership, whether it's an apostle, a 70, someone at the local level, a stake president, a bishop, a relief society president, whatever. Well, I think we learned this lesson in the Bible, in the Old Testament of all places. So let's look at 1 Samuel 24. Hopefully you're familiar with this story. I'm just going to read this part of the chapter heading. David finds Saul in a cave and spares his life. Just by way of context, in case you're not familiar with the story, Israel wanted a king and the Lord said no, but they insisted. And so he's like, okay, I'll give you a king. I choose Saul. And Saul was good and he was righteous, but then it seems that power corrupted him, and he essentially lost his mind and became very jealous when it came to his power and reputation, to the point where he wanted to kill David because a lot of people liked David, and David was getting a lot of praise and a lot of attention. And so David had to literally flee for his life because Saul was trying to kill him. And what was David's attitude? So here we have the king of Israel trying to kill you. Okay. Now, as far as I know, I don't know. Actually, I think at least one of these apostles, I think that they wanted to kill Joseph Smith, but as far as like killing members of the church or doing like really bad things, I don't know. I don't think so. But here we have the king of Israel, chosen by the Lord, who's trying to kill you. What do you do? Pop quiz. What do you do? Okay. Let's find out in verses 6, 7, and 8 of this chapter. And he said unto his men, so David said unto his men, the Lord forbid that I should do this thing unto my master, the Lord's anointed, to stretch forth mine hand against him, seeing he is the anointed of the Lord. So David stayed his servants with these words and suffered them not to rise against Saul. But Saul rose up out of the cave and went on his way. David also arose afterward and went out of the cave and cried after Saul, saying, my Lord, the king. And when Saul looked behind him, David stooped his face to the earth and bowed himself. I guess I should give more context in case you're not familiar with this story. So this was a moment where Saul was vulnerable and David could have easily snuck up behind him and killed him without him knowing. It'd be too late. But he didn't do that. And then in chapter 26, David again spares Saul's life. He again refuses to stretch forth his hand against the Lord's anointed. Verses 9 through 11. And David said to Abishai, destroy him not, for who can stretch forth his hand against the Lord's anointed? Now look at this next part. And be guiltless. You remember, I should have pulled this up, but do you remember that quote? I think it's either from President Spencer W. Kimball or Ezra Taft Benson, but they were talking about following the prophet and how in modern times you have members of the church who mentally stone the prophets. We recently had a talk by Elder Rasband in General Conference where he talked about the story of Moses, and there were those that supported his arms, held his arms up while the battle was going on, and how we need to support the prophet and uphold his prophetic priorities. So I don't think, you might be like, well, I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm not going to, go and protest in downtown Salt Lake. But if we're spreading discord, and if we're spreading doubts about the Lord's anointed and speaking evil of them, I think that this applies. Who can stretch forth his hand, or you might say, who can mentally stone the prophets or gossip about the apostles, speak evil, whatever? Who can stretch forth his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? David said furthermore, as the Lord liveth, the Lord shall smite him. Aha. So David recognizes that there's a problem, obviously, when the Lord's anointed wants to kill you. But it's not David who's going to fix that problem. It's not, justice is not in David's hands. It's in the Lord's. The Lord shall smite him, or his day shall come to die, or he shall descend into battle and perish. The Lord forbid that I should stretch forth mine hand against the Lord's anointed. But I pray thee, take thou now the spear that is at his bolster and the cruse of water, and let us go. Okay, so we have someone in church leadership that we feel has gone astray for whatever reason, and you could be wrong, by the way. You might want to consider that. But, even if it's really clear, it's God's to judge. That situation is for God. You do need to, like David, if you're in danger, you don't just submit yourself to abuse. You get yourself out of that situation. You report it. If it has to do with the law, you report it. And then you also report it to the appropriate church authorities. But when it comes to, you don't like something that somebody's doing, or you don't like how they're voting, or you don't like the buzzwords that they might be using in general conference talks or something like that, I don't think it's our job to try and discredit church leadership or gain a following on social media and then, organize a mental stoning of that apostle or that prophet. We have this from President Gordon B. Hinckley, April 1996 General Conference. The name of the talk is Stand True and Faithful. And I think sometimes this is the concern. When it comes to church leadership, that's sensitive. It's just like the military. You don't want a general going bad and selling secrets to an enemy nation or somehow sabotaging your nation's forces. So yeah, but this is coming from a place of fear. That's understandable with a military or a country or something like that. But when it comes to the church is different. And hopefully you have a solid testimony. Hopefully it's based on Jesus Christ and the Book of Mormon and the Bible and the restored gospel, and you understand what's going on in this dispensation. So look at what he says. I give you my solemn testimony that this church will never be led astray. It is in the hands of God, and should any of its leaders ever attempt to lead it astray, his is the power to remove them. He has said that he has restored his work for the last time. Quote, never again to be destroyed nor given to another people. From Doctrine and Covenants 138:44. And then see also Daniel chapter 2, verses 44 to 45. I have other quotes that talk about the fact that that's one thing that sets this dispensation apart from all the others. It's not going to end in a general apostasy. Individuals can apostatize and be excommunicated. Even church leadership, going back to the early church. The last one to be excommunicated. It looks like he was called in 1918. Richard R. Lyman. I should look into that because I doubt that he didn't return. I think I know that story. Before him, you have John W. Taylor, not to be confused with President John Taylor. He was called 1884. I don't know his story. So yeah, it can happen. Look, we're in mortality. We're all being tested. Even Jesus Christ was being tempted and tested. We're all on probation. The Lord cannot take away your agency. And if you end up in a high up position, you can still choose wrong. You can apostatize. But guess what? The Lord has it figured out. You don't need to worry about that. Like you and me, we don't need to worry about that. That's a Lord problem, not an our problem. And it's not a problem for him. He already knows what's going to happen. So I've added this quote that we just read to my spreadsheet called Quotes A through Z. This is a new row. So it's currently row 39 for apostasy church-wide. This is something that I feel like it's not very well understood among certain communities here on YouTube and on social media. There are people that would have you believe that it is inevitable that there's going to be a church-wide apostasy and there's going to have to be this mysterious figure that comes along to set things straight, the Davidic servant or the one mighty and strong. We've talked about those things ad nauseum. Those are not valid prophecies about the future. They're misunderstandings by certain individuals. The main problem is that it suggests that church leadership is going to go astray. And guess what? No, it's not. I'm going to have to add on to this row, but we need to stick to faithful sources, you guys. Now, we're getting to the part where we're going to talk about politics, but just a few more things about following church authorities. There's a couple good quotes here. This is row 208 of the same spreadsheet for following church authorities. This first one is from President George Q. Cannon, first counselor in the first presidency. He says, God has chosen his servants. Okay, God has chosen. So unlike politics, if you're a very political person, it's not an election. It's not the voice of the people. It's not a political process that you can manipulate. God chose them, and he chose them before the world was created. Okay? God has chosen his servants. He claims it as his prerogative to condemn them if they need condemnation. He has not given it to us individually to censure and condemn them. That includes on social media. Everyone has an opinion, and it's fine. You know, you can express your concerns, but when it comes to condemning them, censoring them, that's where you cross a line. No man, however strong he may be in the faith, however high in the priesthood, can speak evil of the Lord's anointed and find fault with God's authority on the earth without incurring his displeasure. Yeah, but he voted for this person, or he supported this campaign, or he comes from this place, or no. Those aren't exceptions. Those aren't loopholes to where you can, oh, now I can condemn him, or now I can start sowing discord among church membership. No. Without incurring his displeasure. The Holy Spirit will withdraw itself from such a man, and he will go into darkness. This being the case, do you not see how important it is that we should be careful? However difficult it may be for us to understand the reason for any action of the authorities of the church, we should not too hastily call their acts in question and pronounce them wrong. There's too many people that will do that right away as soon as they see something that they don't like. And I don't think it's that we don't question things or think about things, but we need to have this fundamental understanding of how the church works first and have a solid foundation and make sure that everything's okay with our testimony and making sure that we have our priorities straight. When you don't have your priorities straight, like when God doesn't come first and his church, then you're practicing idolatry. Whenever you replace God as number one in your life, whether it's with politics or sports or literal idols, you're practicing idolatry. And some people do that with politics. This one is from Elder Hartman Rector Jr. of the 70, April 1974 General Conference. The statement of the prophet Joseph Smith concerning the danger of fault finding or rebelling against the Lord's anointed is very significant. I will give you one of the keys of the mysteries of the kingdom, said the prophet. It is an eternal principle that has existed with God from all eternity, that man who rises up to condemn others, find fault with the church, saying that they are out of the way while he himself is righteous, then know assuredly that that man is in the high road to apostasy. And if he does not repent, will apostatize as God lives. End quote. Then refusal on our part to sustain or follow the Lord's anointed servants is a form of rebellion, which is open or willful resistance to and defiance of God's authority. This is extremely serious. Rebellion is the opposite of obedience and leads to the expulsion from the kingdom. This is what happened to Lucifer. He refused to sustain the Lord in that he would not follow and do the things which he had seen the Father do before him. When we fail to do what we know we should, having the light before us, but refusing to obey, notwithstanding the covenants made in the waters of baptism, we become rebels. Some even seem to delight in their rebellion. They brag about it. If they only knew that the Lord's anger is kindled against all the rebellious, they shall be pierced with much sorrow, and they shall fail. So, this is no small thing. It's not inconsequential when we start to produce content about a certain apostle and their politics, and we start causing doubt among faithful members of the church. I, for one, am going to stand up for what's right. I try to always do that. I'm not saying that I don't have faults and I haven't had missteps, but I'm always going to stand up for the Lord and his anointed. Always. And I'm going to leave it to him. I'm not going to try and fix the problem myself. That's not how things are done in the church. You can do that in politics. There is debate and there is politicking and all this stuff, but not in the church. Okay, the last one before we start talking about politics. This is my most recent one for this topic. This is President Nelson, April 2021 General Conference. Christ is risen. Faith in him will move mountains. Okay, now think about this as we think about what sources we look to for our information and influence and content. Okay, it doesn't matter if they're a member of the church. It does not matter if they're a member of the church. In fact, that kind of makes it even more dangerous when it's a member of the church that starts dabbling in these things. This is President Nelson. If you have doubts about God the Father and his beloved Son, or the validity of the restoration, or the veracity of Joseph Smith's divine calling as a prophet, choose to believe and stay faithful. Take your questions to the Lord and to other faithful sources. Study with the desire to believe rather than with the hope that you can find a flaw in the fabric of a prophet's life or a discrepancy in the scriptures. Stop increasing your doubts by rehearsing them with other doubters. So if there's members of the church that are causing you doubt about church leadership, stop increasing your doubts by rehearsing them with other doubters. Allow the Lord to lead you on your journey of spiritual discovery. Now, I just have 3 more quotes that have to do with politics. Again, some people have politics as their number one thing in their life. It's a form of idolatry when we put some other system, some other philosophy above the gospel, above the doctrine of the church. When we treat it as our first religion and then religion as our second religion. And a lot of times the people that engage in this type of thing cause contention. Frankly, they're very contentious. That's been my experience throughout my life. So it's not a new phenomenon. This is from President Wilford Woodruff at the time that he said this. He was president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. Journal of Discourses, volume 21, page 302, column B. He says, "This is election time. I will say, do not, my brethren, allow the spirit of contention and dissension to creep in among you. I am ashamed of some of our people who, instead of using their powers and influence in endeavoring to unite the people, go to work and raise strife. Okay, this is another clue. The people that you listen to, whether it's on the internet or neighbors or people at church, are these people who unite, or are they tribal? And do they work to raise strife? If they are, that may not be a good influence. Continuing. And the result is that in some of our cities, an opposition ticket is gotten up, and our own people in these places divide one against the other. I say, shame on the elder or man holding the priesthood, the authority delegated to him by high heaven, who will do this thing. The heavens are displeased with such a man, and unless he repents, he will certainly be found numbered with those who are arrayed against God. Arrayed against, I should highlight that. Why didn't I do that the first time? Arrayed against God and his kingdom on the earth. We have the whole world against us, besides many evil spirits to contend with, and we certainly should not divide one against another. Now, I was surprised that this was the only quote that I had for the topic of politics on my quotes A through Z spreadsheet. I've added a couple more. One from the first presidency, and then another one from President Oaks, of all people. So back in 2006, this was just shortly before I came back from my mission. I served in the Spain Barcelona mission. This is Deseret News. Letter by LDS leaders cheer Utah Democrats. Already some of you are cringing. Now listen to me. Listen carefully. And you should know this if you've been watching my channel. I am not of that persuasion, okay? And it doesn't mean that I could never vote for one or listen to them. Just listen, okay? In case you think that I'm one of those, I'm not. But listen what was put out. This was a letter that was read in church. And then they published part of it here on Deseret News. Quote, principles compatible with the gospel may be found in the platforms of all major political parties. Think about that. Think about if just one party if it was just black and white in politics. One party is all right. If you're not with this party, then you're wrong. That doesn't sound right to me when it comes to politics, because some things just come down to preference. Some things come down to problem solving, and you have different ideas of how to solve a problem that both sides want to solve. But imagine, we think about socialism in communism, for example, or any form of totalitarian government. And the fear is that that could happen in the United States, and then everybody is forced to believe the same way, like what you see over in North Korea or communist countries, where everything is unanimous and everybody votes for the continuation of the great leader to have another term. And there's imagine, we despise that, right? That's not good. That's not normal. It's not natural. Obviously, one side is being suppressed. So why would we want to try and resemble that? Now, with the doctrine of the church, not with politics, but with the doctrine of the church, we are trying to become one in gospel principles: love, charity, patience, brotherly kindness, all the things, right? That's something that we're all trying to share together and be on the same page. But with politics, could you imagine if there was just one party in this country? We would basically be no different than North Korea. Okay, so let's get back to what it said in the letter. Principles compatible with the gospel may be found in the platforms of all major political parties. While the church does not endorse political candidates, platforms, or parties, members are urged to be full participants in political, governmental, and community affairs. Okay, so that's huge. In the United States, you have the two main parties, the Republicans and Democrats, and most members of the church, I'm sure it's still the case. Most members of the church are Republican, usually because most of the time they have conservative values, which usually line up the best with our church, but it's not as simple as that. Okay, let's go to what President Oaks said. This is in the April 2021 General Conference. The name of the talk is Defending Our Divinely Inspired Constitution. This is toward the end of the talk, section 4. Okay, listen carefully because he is now president of the church. It was already important. Even if he was not in the first presidency, it's still important. But now, with him being president of the church, and we may need what he said here even more as we go through his presidency and his time rolls on. He said, "Our belief in divine inspiration gives Latter-day Saints a unique responsibility to uphold and defend the United States Constitution and principles of constitutionalism wherever we live. We should trust in the Lord and be positive about this nation's future." I have this paragraph right here as a separate quote in other places on my spreadsheet because the people that are very political, I feel, the majority of them, also tend to be very fearful. They have a very fear-based mindset, and it creeps into the way that they see the second coming and prophecies and, oh no, what are we going to do about our freedom? And yes, we need to defend our freedom, especially religious freedom and freedom of speech. But it's like fear just permeates their soul. And so they get very negative about the future of the United States and how that ties into the second coming. And it goes into like really extreme places. But here we have President Oaks saying, we should trust in the Lord. So maybe we should check that and check our testimony and see if we really believe if the Lord is in control. And then he says, and be positive about this nation's future. And so many members of the church do the exact opposite of this. Continuing, what else are faithful Latter-day Saints to do? We must pray for the Lord to guide and bless all nations and their leaders. This is part of our article of faith. Being subject to presidents or rulers, of course. Okay, being subject to presidents or rulers, of course, poses no obstacle to our opposing individual laws or policies. It does require that we exercise our influence civilly and peacefully within the framework of our constitutions and applicable laws. On contested issues, we should seek to moderate and unify. Again, when you talk about politics, are you moderating and unifying, or are you dividing and becoming even more extreme? Are you looking to build bridges and compromise where possible and try and come together so that at least everybody gets something? Or is it all black and white? It's your way or the highway. How do you think? And is that what you do in your personal life in the way that you deal with the people in your life? Do you try and unify and try and have harmony where possible? Or is it your way or the highway? All right, continuing. There are other duties that are part of upholding the inspired Constitution. We should learn and advocate the inspired principles of the Constitution. We should seek out and support wise and good persons who will support those principles in their public actions. We should be knowledgeable citizens who are active in making our influence felt in civic affairs. In the United States and in other democracies, Political influence is exercised by running for office, which we encourage, by voting, by financial support, by membership and service in political parties, and by ongoing communications to officials, parties, and candidates. To function well, a democracy needs all of these, but a conscientious citizen does not need to provide all of them. There are many political issues, and no party, platform, or individual candidate can satisfy all personal preferences. Each citizen must therefore decide which issues are most important to him or her at any particular time. Then members should seek inspiration. Okay, that's important. Are we just doing what we think is best? Are we just acting on our fear and our anger and our selfishness maybe sometimes? Or are we actually praying about it and consulting with the Lord? Then members should seek inspiration on how to exercise their influence according to their individual priorities. This process will not be easy. It may require changing party support or candidate choices, even from election to election. Okay, so you don't have to be locked in like North Korea and stick with just one political party. So just so you guys know, such independent actions will sometimes require voters to support candidates or political parties or platforms whose other positions they cannot approve. That is one reason. Okay, now let's think about this as we think about church leadership who may have voted differently from us or supported other parties. Let's read this again. Pay attention. So, okay, so we see somebody that's voting some other way or donating to a particular party. Oh no. Well, this is what President Oak says. Such independent actions will sometimes require voters to support candidates or political parties or platforms whose other positions they cannot approve. That is one reason we encourage our members to refrain from judging one another in political matters. So it is possible, you guys. It is possible that there's one issue that you view as very important, and you've prayed about it, you've consulted with the Lord about it, and even though that party is mostly against what you believe, that one thing in that one moment may stand out to you, and you may feel inspired to vote that way for that one issue, or maybe a collection of small issues that you feel outweigh the rest of what that party does. Does it make sense? It doesn't always have to be black and white. All right, continuing. We should never assert that a faithful Latter-day Saint cannot belong to a particular party or vote for a particular candidate. We teach correct principles and leave our members to choose how to prioritize and apply those principles on the issues presented from time to time. We also insist, and we ask our local leaders to insist, that political choices and affiliations not be the subject of teachings or advocacy in any of our church meetings. Boy, I hope that we don't do that. I hope that we do not do that. Church is not a place to talk about politics or bash the other side or promote your own politics. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints will, of course, exercise its right to endorse or oppose specific legislative proposals that we believe will impact the free exercise of religion or the essential interests of church organizations. So I hope that you found this video helpful. I hope that it's changed somebody. Some people are just stuck in their ways, and if that describes you, I would try and figure out a way to fix that issue. It's not good to be strong-headed, strong-willed, because basically what it means is that you're rigid. You're not flexible. You think in black and white ways. And I'm not talking about the gospel. I'm talking about your way or the highway. You're unable to discern nuance. You think that you have to strictly vote. It doesn't matter the individual that's running for office for either party, you have to strictly stick with one party. I think there's another quote, something that's been said recently, that you should not just, when you're at the polls, that when you're voting, you shouldn't just like go through the thing and be like, oh, okay, this party, this party, this party, and only this party. There's a word or a phrase or a name for that. But you really need to be thoughtful, because it's just like when you're assessing an individual in your life that is maybe making bad choices. That doesn't mean that they're completely irredeemable, or that they can't change, or that they can't improve their life. If you think in black and white terms with that, then you just like discard people. And that's not what the Savior does. The Savior looks for the good in each person and works with them throughout their life. They do have their agency, but you have to be able to see nuance and try to make the best out of a situation and work with others. And that doesn't mean that you compromise your own values. You do stick up for what's right, and but you also try and be a peacemaker and compromise on things that you can compromise, and just try and have peace and avoid contention. It's as simple as that. So you guys, let's make sure that we have a solid testimony, number one, because if you do, then I don't think it's hard to follow church leadership and you don't become suspicious. Or if you are suspicious and you have good reason, then you know how the Lord deals with things. We read the scriptures and see what the scriptures say. We learn what they said in 1 Samuel chapter 24 and 26. We've listened to other faithful sources, President Hinckley, President Oaks, President Nelson, and others. Let's make sure that our testimonies are solid. Let's make sure that fear is not governing our lives. Let's make sure that we're going to faithful sources, because if you drown out faithful sources with just the chaos of the world, then you can probably expect chaos in your life. And chaos is not fun. Anyway, that's all that I have for this one. I'll talk to you guys later.